Welcome to Podcast on the Brink, your weekly dose of Indiana basketball news and discussion, brought to you by the Assembly Call and Inside the Hall. I'm your host, Jerod Morris. Join me live at assemblycall.com every Thursday night and immediately following every IU game for our live IU postgame show. And visit InsideTheHall.com for complete coverage of IU basketball and to join the discussion in the Inside the Hall Premium Forum.
Hoosier fans, it's Indiana basketball time. IU Basketball Mini-Series tickets are now available in 6-game or 3-game ticket packages, as well as individual games. This is your chance to check out the Hoosiers inside beautiful Simon Scott Assembly Hall. For more information, call or text 812-855-4006 or visit IUHoosiers.com. Go IU!
On this week's edition of Podcast on the Brink, Alex Bozich and I are very pleased to be joined by Jon Crispin, one of our favorite recurring guests. Jon, of course, an announcer for the Big Ten Network. He was on the call for Indiana's season opener against Chicago State. And so we get his impressions on seeing the Hoosiers up close for the first time this season. What did he think about Romeo Langford? He obviously had many positive comments about Robert Phinisee, so we talk about that. We talk about what role he sees as being the best for Devontae Green moving forward, what Indiana can do to get better at his free throw shooting. Jon obviously was a very good free throw shooter when he played at Penn State. So we talked to him about all of those topics and more, big picture, what he expects from Indiana this season here on this edition of Podcast on the Brink. Before we get to that discussion with Jon Crispin, a few words about this week's sponsor, Home Field. Home Field is the sponsor for this week's edition of Podcast on the Brink. And at homefieldapparel.com, you will find the comfiest and most unique licensed IU apparel available anywhere. Started by an IU grad, all Home Field apparel is designed and printed out of Indianapolis. And this holiday season, yes, the holiday season is coming up. It is, it's November. It's the second week in November already. So it's coming. It's time to start thinking about it. You can find the perfect holiday gift for the IU fan in your life with premium IU apparel from Home Field. The cutoff for guaranteed Christmas delivery is December 19th. Again, I know that sounds like it's way out there, but it's going to come quickly. So be sure to get your order in before then. If I can offer a suggestion, I will, as I did last week and the few weeks prior, I will suggest that you look at the IU Champions tee. It's got all 5 championship seasons listed, a really cool design. As soon as this shirt came out, I bought it. I really like it. I wear it, so that's certainly one that you could look at. But they've got a lot of other ones. They've got some cool sweatshirts, and they've brought back some of the old IU logos that you don't see very often. So go check it out at homefieldapparel.com. I think you'll really like the stuff that they have. And again, if you're looking for a holiday gift for the IU fan in your life, homefieldapparel.com is the place to go. And don't forget to use the promo code BRINK, B-R-I-N-K, at checkout. You will get 15% off of your first order at homefieldapparel.com. Home Field, wear one for the team. All right, here is our conversation with Jon Crispin from the Big Ten Network. And we are joined on this week's episode of Podcast on the Brink by Jon Crispin, who called last night's Indiana-Chicago State game. Jon, welcome back to Podcast on the Brink. Always great to have you.
Matt, thanks for having me. It's a great time of year, right? Baseball just finished up. Baseball when it actually matters in October. Basketball's back. Football's rolling. This is my favorite time of year.
No, it's the best time of year. This all the way through March. Obviously, this is what we live for, especially as IU fans. We know how much you enjoy getting to see games at Simon Scott Assembly Hall. What was your first impression last night of Romeo Langford in particular in his first college game?
Well, I think the best thing that Romeo brings to the table has nothing to do with how good he is. It's an excitement around the program that you really haven't seen for a while. And there's all this, there's always talk about, how do you live up to Bobby Knight? Well, I think you don't ever live up to the hype that was Bobby Knight or the program that was Bobby Knight. You have to put your own stamp on it. And it means you have to play your style of basketball, your culture of a program, but you need talent to back it. You need guys that people can get excited about, and he's got that in Romeo Langford. It's an excitement that we haven't seen for a long, long time. You've had successful programs, you've had successful years at Indiana, but it hasn't had the same level of excitement. Even a Final Four team, it doesn't have the same level of excitement that this program seems to have, where it's new with Archie Miller. You've got one of the most talented players the program's really seen in ever, maybe, in Romeo Langford. And I think it's less to do with what he brings to the table as a basketball player and more to do with what he brings to the table in terms of supporting the new culture that is Indiana basketball and the excitement that comes.
Speaking of him as a basketball player, I mean, you're obviously right about that. The excitement has been incredible. Just, all of the anticipation this offseason. But now having seen him as a player, especially what he did in the first half, we really kind of put his full offensive arsenal on display, pretty much everything but 3-point shooting and obviously the free throw shooting. But what did you take away from that in terms of, you can only take so much from a game against Chicago State, but what did you take away from him as a player?
Well, my player comparison for him last night was usually kind of how it goes with me. It doesn't really make a ton of sense the more you think about it. And with him, I said he reminds me of Alvin Kamara, whatever the heck his name is, for the New Orleans Saints, where everything he does physically seems like it's effortless. He's just better than everybody else. The skill set's definitely there. The skill set's there to be an NBA, a top 10 draft pick next year. That's not a question, but physically he's able to play at this level. And when I talk about the physicality of this game, it's not just the physicality of the 40 minutes. It's the physicality of now a 20-game conference schedule that he's going to be asked to play 30-plus minutes. So, yes, skill set, it's all there. There's no question. There's never been a question. This is one of the best players you're going to see in college basketball. But physically, I think he's going to be able to take on the role that they need him to take on. And that might be the biggest thing. We already know about what he can do basketball-wise. Skill set, everything is there. If you want me to pick him apart, I don't even know what I would find that I would say, this is an issue. I'd say maybe creating more shots for himself, but at the same time, he's unselfish. He shared the basketball. So I wouldn't pick apart any of his skill set. I would just say that physically, I think that's the thing that excites me the most, is that this is a freshman that could play 30-plus minutes, including that 20-game conference schedule. And I think he's going to be able to give you a lot.
John, one of the interesting things, you actually just brought it up, Romeo playing in isolation. And I had the luck of being based in Southern Indiana, Louisville area, where I could go to probably 85% of his high school games last year. So I've watched him quite a bit. And one of the strengths that he does have, at least in high school, was kind of his ability to create. Now, I don't know if that was kind of just based on who he had around him. He did have a pretty good high school team. But as we move forward here with the point guard situation, one of the things Jerod and I were actually talking about a little bit before we started recording here was just kind of how these two different guys, Robert Phinisee and Devontae Green, fit around Romeo. And you don't want to make too much out of this one game, but based on what I saw, and I'm curious if you agree with me, it seems that Robert Phinisee may be the better fit with Romeo Langford, just in terms of being able to distribute the ball and get him set up in the right positions, whereas Devontae Green may be better suited to come off the bench as a guy who can score the ball.
Devontae Green may be better suited to come off the bench and be a two-guard. I know he's a point guard, but really the way he creates, it's to score more so than to pass. Rob Phinisee, I'm telling you, he is the guy you build a program around, and I'm not overstating that in any way. I mean that 100%. You're going to get guys like Romeo Langford because of Rob Phinisee going forward. He's the kind of guy everyone will want to play with. He makes everyone better. My comparison to him was Aaron Rodgers. He's got a poise to him as a freshman that is unlike anything I've ever seen. He's comfortable on the floor. He makes good decisions. He sets the tone defensively, which is exactly what Archie wants. He controls the offense. He initiates the offense. He controls the tempo, the pace of the game. I think what you saw in terms of playing Devontae Green and Rob Phinisee together was what you're going to see a lot of. And then you throw in a smaller lineup where you play Romeo Langford at the 3, Juwan Morgan maybe at the 4, and look for Evan Fitzner to even play the 5. It's a 5-out, none-in lineup with 5 playmakers, 5 scorers. I worry a little bit about Devontae Green just because of the decision-making. It's almost at times, if we're going to stick with Indiana here for comparisons, it's at times he can be Troy Williams with the basketball. where, Troy can make great plays, and that's what Devontae Green does. He makes great plays, but at times he can bite himself in the butt. And just by being a little careless at times, being a little carefree at times, you can't do that, not in the Big Ten, not if you want to be the high-level team that Indiana needs to be. So I think Rob Phinisee is the guy, and I think Al Durham is another guy that we didn't see any of. He was hurt, but Archie said he's a guy, he needs him back. He trusts him. He brings a different dynamic to the team. He's lengthy. He can defend around the perimeter. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Devontae Green play a lot more at the 2 and be a part of the offense and not just the initiator.
From a team dynamic, Devontae Green has been talked a lot about this offseason as the guy at point guard. It'll be kind of his, I guess a lot of people assume that it would be his job. I mean, how do you think that works within, the team if he's, coming off the bench and this freshman has come take his spot? I mean, how do you feel like he's going to respond? And do you ultimately think that Rob Phinisee is going to be the starting point guard for Indiana by season's end?
I think Rob Phinisee is going to be the point guard going forward. He's a guy you want to build on because coaches want a point guard they can trust. That's the bottom line. The best teams, the best coaches find point guards that they can trust. Cassius Winston didn't start at Michigan State until Tom Izzo could trust him. It had nothing to do with whether he was better than Tum Tum Nairn or not. He was always better than Tum Tum Nairn in the sense of being a basketball player. But Tom Izzo didn't trust him to make the right decisions, to lead that team. Until he trusted him, he wasn't going to start. So I think what you saw from Rob Phinisee yesterday was a guy that coaches can trust to put in a tough situation. Coaches could trust to start the game, and coaches can trust to finish a game. And I'm not sure we saw that Devontae Green earned any trust yesterday, whether they be careless turnovers or just not getting the ball moving as much. I think what you saw is you could trust Devontae Green to make plays off the ball, make plays when he needs to make plays, but not be the initiator and leader of the offense. So I would expect, I would expect to see Rob Phinisee to be the point guard going forward. And Devontae Green doesn't have a diminished role because of that. Devontae Green's still going to have opportunities to make plays. He's still going to have the ball in his hands, but it may be as point guard by committee where you're on the floor with Rob Phinisee.
John, obviously Indiana wins by 49 points. There's a lot to like. The young guys look good, all of that. But it wasn't a night without warts. And so there were two things that kind of stuck out to me as negatives. I want to hit both of them with you and just get your thoughts on them. The first one is free throw shooting. Indiana was not good shooting free throws last year. They clearly want to be a team that's going to get fouled this year. That is a big focus. Archie has stated it, and they did it. They got to the line 33 times, but didn't shoot well. Look, it's just one game. We don't want to overreact to it, but how concerned are you about the free throw shooting and being a good free throw shooter yourself? Like, what would you do as a coach to try to snap this program out of its free throw funk?
I would play more teams that play man-to-man defense. Now, in the non-conference, when you're playing inferior opponents, good luck. John Beilein saw this last year. I think he played 6 straight games where they went against the zone. You find no rhythm against the zone. You don't get any movement. You don't make those open shots the way you do against man-to-man, because in a man-to-man, there's drive, there's kicks, there's rhythm, the ball moves, the bodies are moving, there's rhythm to the game. So when you see guys missing free throws, it's less to do with them being able to make free throws or not make free throws. It's the same thing with them struggling last year to shoot the three. It had less to do with them being able to make three-point shots and more to do with not trusting the rhythm that they're trying to find in the offense. So when I watch a team play against the zone, I want to see man offense against the zone, because that's the only way you're going to create rhythm within the game on the offensive side. They were great in transition. They were great when they were able to get the ball inside the paint. But when they didn't and the ball moved around the perimeter, they didn't shoot it well. And when you don't shoot it well and you get fouled, you don't have rhythm when you get to the foul line. So I get it. As a shooter, I totally get it. It doesn't mean that you should miss your free throws. I think that's just kind of an anomaly at times. Romeo Langford was, 2 for 9 at one point, 2 for 8 at one point? That's an anomaly. He's a great shooter. I don't expect to ever see that again. When the team starts to play against opponents that are of their caliber, playing against man-to-man where the ball has to move, where there's rhythm within the game, not just within the offense, but within the game, you're going to see shooting percentages continue to rise. So it's something, it's hard to explain to people, but rhythm is one of the most important things about an offense that you can find. And you can't state enough how important it is. And the best offenses don't score points. The best offenses create opportunities. The best offenses create rhythm. Because when you have rhythm in the game, like Duke had late last night, Duke had a rhythm within the game. They didn't miss. Well, it's because there's confidence, there's flow, and players know how to play. They know how to shoot when there's rhythm and flow to the game, and there was none against the zone all night.
Hey, let's talk tickets for a quick minute, shall we? You saw what Romeo Langford did in his debut against Chicago State. You're going to want to go see him in person while he's still playing for Indiana for the Cream and Crimson, and when you do that, SeatGeek is the place to go. You know, getting tickets online can be really complicated. You probably know this if you've tried to get tickets online. With hundreds of sites and varying levels of reliability, it's hard to know who to trust, and that is why SeatGeek is the way to go. SeatGeek pulls millions of tickets into one place so you can easily find the seats you want for a price you're willing to pay. There's nothing quite like being there in person, and SeatGeek will get you closer to the action for a great value. This is why I have SeatGeek on my phone. It's why I use SeatGeek when I'm looking for sports tickets, for concert tickets, for other live events. It's designed to make the ticket buying experience easier than it's ever been. SeatGeek searches multiple ticket sites. They grade every ticket based on value. So SeatGeek helps you immediately identify the best seats that fit your budget. Make sure that you're getting a really good value for your dollar. And every purchase is fully guaranteed. So you can shop for tickets on SeatGeek with confidence. So go to SeatGeek. Look at the upcoming IU home dates. Look for upcoming IU road dates if you don't happen to live in Bloomington. But get there, support the Hoosiers, see Romeo Langford live and in person. And when you do it, use SeatGeek to buy the tickets. And best of all, listeners to Podcast on the Brink get $20 off your first SeatGeek purchase. Just download the SeatGeek app, enter the promo code BRINK, B-R-I-N-K today. That's promo code BRINK, and you will get $20 off your first SeatGeek purchase. SeatGeek, life's an event. We have the tickets. Now back to Jon Crispin. Well, that's interesting that you say that, because that kind of leads into my second negative from last night. You've always been a guy that's been really high on Juwan Morgan, and he was terrific last year. A lot is being expected of him this year, and I didn't think he played very well last night, and part of it is he just kind of looked out of rhythm. He looked a little listless, didn't have some of the energy that we're used to seeing from him, I thought, especially on the defensive end. Am I way off base? Like, did you see that in person? And I guess just in general, what do you take away from Juwan's performance last night?
You know, Juwan's performance was Juwan's performance. It wasn't anything spectacular, but I wouldn't say it was bad. I think it's just hard. I think it would have been better off if they played Louisville yesterday. You would have seen a better performance from everybody. When you're playing an opponent that is inferior as Chicago State was, and that's not to diminish Chicago State, it is hard. When you know you can really win this game by playing backwards, it's hard. And I don't think Juwan had a bad game. I don't think he had a good game. I just think it was a vanilla game where, he got his, he scored here and there. And quite frankly, if he got positioned down low every time, if he really worked for it, he could have scored a layup every single time down floor. I've been there before where we've played Bucknell right before Thanksgiving when I was at Penn State. It is hard to get up for that game. I've been there before when I was at UCLA and we're playing UC San Diego. Good luck. It is hard to get up for that game, particularly when so much of the attention is not even about the team, but it's about one player. So there's going to be some things that they have to figure out, and they're going to figure those things out when they play better competition. They're going to realize how important Juwan Morgan is, and Juwan Morgan's going to realize how important his contribution is when they play better talent. So it's hard to take too much from that game, and it's hard to look down on anybody, whether they had a good game or a bad game, when you win by 50 against a supremely inferior opponent.
John, I feel like every season we talk about in the preseason depth for every team and how it looks like, 9, 10, 11, 12 guys could potentially play it. But then when you get into the meat of the schedule, you're really only playing your 8 or 9 best guys against good competition. In terms of Indiana's just their overall composition of the roster, how do you kind of assess their depth at this point? And do you feel like they can be a team that is going to be able to go more than 8 or 9 deep, or do you kind of feel like that's going to be where the line's drawn when the conference season rolls around and they start to play some of these marquee opponents?
I think you play 8 or 9 guys because that's what gives you the best chance to win. You play 10 when you got foul trouble. You go to your 11th and 12th guy when you have injuries. But what we can't say enough about in terms of the value of depth is what it brings in practice. And I mentioned this in the broadcast at one point, and I did. I brought up Isaac Haas, right? And the worst possible thing you can do is bring up a Purdue dude in an Indiana broadcast. But I did it, and the point that I was trying to make is the best thing about depth is competition. And the competition is there in practice to bring out the best in your opponents on the floor in practice, which are your teammates in a game. Devontae Green pushes Rob Phinisee. Rob Phinisee pushes Devontae Green, and ideally both of them get better. You have depth in that regard. Al Durham comes in and pushes both of them. So you bring out the best in those three guys, which means those three guys are ready to play at any given moment. If they need to play 30 minutes, they'll play 30 minutes because of the competition that they're going against in practice. When you don't have depth, your starting five will never be as good as they could be. And when I say I brought up Isaac Haas, I go back to A.J. Hammonds and Isaac Haas. A.J. Hammonds isn't as good as he is if it's not for Isaac Haas pushing him. And Isaac Haas is not as good as he is if it's not for A.J. Hammonds saying, no, I want to be the man. It's competition. Competition is the greatest motivator in sports. And if you don't stand up and step up to competition, you shouldn't be playing. And that's when coaches learn how to not trust a certain player. If they don't step up to competition and play it and practice, they don't trust them to play in a game. And what Archie's got, he's got 10, 11, 12, maybe even 13 guys that he can put up against one another in practice to bring out the best in everybody else. So that's what the real depth is all about. You're going to play 8, 9 guys at times. Archie may play 7 because those are the 7 that give you the best chance to win. But he trusts that if he needs to go 8, 9, 10 deep, he's got it. Why? Because of the competition that they have in practice that matches the competition that they're going to face in a game in a Big Ten scenario and beyond.
Last question about last night's game before we kind of talk more about the Big Ten at large. I want to ask you about Zach McRoberts because, one of the big kind of offseason storylines we talked about was, can Zach become a more confident shooter? Because if he can, combined with his defense, he can be such a valuable asset for this team and, with the players that are going to be around him. Last night, he goes 2 for 2 from downtown. Do you notice anything different about him as a shooter in terms of his confidence, his, kind of readiness to shoot, anything like that?
Well, the confidence in shooting comes from the confidence in the expectation that your teammates have for you, your teammates and your coaches. So the expectations for Zach McRoberts have been elevated, where they expect him to be a key contributor. And when you become a key contributor, you trust yourself a little bit more. It was why I struggled at UCLA. And I hate to do it. I hate to always put my own thoughts or perspective in on another guy, but we're all so similar as athletes. We all kind of carry the same confidence and fears and humility at times and pride at times. It's all very similar. And for Zach McRoberts, he's better when more is expected of him. He's not as good when he just kind of comes in and plays 5 minutes and they cheer because he got a charge. He's a high-level basketball player. And when you expect high-level things from him, he's going to shoot the basketball better. He's great with ball fakes. He gets himself open. He gets teammates open. He rebounds well. He defends well. He shares the basketball. He makes everybody else better. And when you expect more of him, he's going to be a better shooter. So I think what you're seeing is you see a guy who's confident in his role as being a key contributor, not just a role player. And that's the thing. I mean, you got to remember, guys that play at the level that Indiana is, and nobody came in wanting to be just a role player. They all wanted to be significant. And McRoberts is in a position where he can now be a significant contributor, and I think that makes him a better player in the end.
John, Michigan State, I feel like, was the safe pick in the preseason to win the league. They very well may end up doing that. But I feel like it's pretty wide open in terms of who could end up winning the Big Ten. If you had to, I know you do power rankings and things of that nature for BTN.com, but if you were handicapping maybe the top 3 or 4 teams at this point, and I know a lot can change over here this next month before we start playing some conference games in early December, but who are maybe your 3 or 4 teams you're looking at right now that have a chance to win the Big Ten, in your opinion?
Well, I think you go Michigan State first and foremost, and I think it's important to point out why. I mean, and I don't know if a lot of people pick them because they're Michigan State. I mean, when you talk about reporters who don't really cover the game of basketball, they just kind of follow the teams and follow the storylines and then write about it. Yeah, they always pick Michigan State. But the reason why Michigan State is the likely favorite to win the regular season title, and I say regular season title because the Big Ten tournament, anything happens at that point. And you have probably 7 teams that could win the Big Ten tournament championship. the Big Ten tournament, the Big Ten regular season is going to be won by a team that's got great balance, because the conference itself is very balanced this year. Teams are balanced. Competition level is balanced. There's probably 8 or 9 teams that could all compete with one another. But Michigan State is at their best when they have to play with great balance. They don't have a star, which I think suits Tom Izzo's teams even better. They've got great experience with the guys that they have. So that's why I would see them as the regular season favorite. Beyond that, Indiana's in the next category. And the next category includes teams like Nebraska, teams like Wisconsin, where you had guys like Brad Davison that emerged as a leader, and they're able to win in a different way. That is the normal Wisconsin way, which is feed Ethan Happ, play inside out, double down on the post, kick out, get an open shot. They're able to win in a different way, and I think that gives Wisconsin a little bit of an edge on a lot of their other opponents. But there are other teams. We talk about Nebraska, maybe the best starting 5 in the conference in terms of a dynamic group with experience and length and athleticism and a home court advantage. Nebraska's right up there. But then there are some other teams like Michigan and Penn State that really no one's talking about, but they can win a Big Ten tournament championship. They can even win a Big Ten regular season if they figure things out early enough. The struggle with John Beilein teams is they learn how to read and react, not just play offense. They don't just you go here and then we score a layup. No, they read and react, and that takes time. That's why those teams mesh in January, February, and then in March. But teams like Penn State, people are sleeping on. They're going to be better than they were last year, and they played pretty well last year. They're going to be better because they have better balance. They're not relying on one guy or another like Tony Carr last year. They have more contributors, and they have high-level talent with Lamar Stevens, Josh Reeves, and Mike Watkins. And now with young Miles Dredd coming in, he's not getting enough credit. Tough guy to defend. So there are teams out there, I'd say 1 through 5 to me, with Nebraska, Michigan, Indiana, Michigan State, Penn State, and Wisconsin that could really make some noise. And it's not just in this conference, it's beyond. I'm talking top 25 level teams there.
As you get ready to go around now to different Big Ten arenas calling games and getting your first impressions of all these different teams, who are or what are some players in particular that you're most looking forward to seeing for the first time?
For the first time, I go back to Penn State. Miles Dredd, I think, is going to be a lot better than anyone realizes. I'm also interested to see what Jabari Wheeler as a point guard brings to the table for that program, because I think they could be really good. I also want to see the stars, and it's like watching a player for the first time. We know what James Palmer can do, but what can you do with expectation? We know what Jordan Murphy can do. What can you do with expectation? I think that's what I want to see. I want to see guys like Ethan Happ, Brad Davison. What can you do now that everybody knows Brad Davison can play? Can you still be the leader? Can you stop doing silly things like trying to take every single charge and be a leader of a team that has the potential to be really good? So it's not about freshmen as much as it's about guys like Joshua Langford at Michigan State, Matt McQuaid at Michigan State. Can you be a consistent contributor night in, night out to give me 15, 16 points and be a real threat and not be an inconsistent guy that hurts your team at times? So those are the guys I look for. I mean, at Indiana, I think it's a Juwan Morgan, where there is great expectation on him to do everything really well. And if he does everything really well, this is an Indiana team that could finish high and be a top 25 team. Can Carson Edwards, they're talking about him as the National Player of the Year. Can you live up to that hype when the hype is also going to bring double teams at the guard position? That ain't easy to do. So I'm excited to see those guys play. It's not just about incoming freshmen, obviously Romeo Langford. Everybody wants to see Romeo Langford. It's about, can the guys that now have expectation, can the programs that now have expectation like Nebraska, can they live up to that expectation? Because the execution needs to match that expectation if they want to actually win.
The national narrative about the conference seems to be that most of the national folks are pretty down on the Big Ten. And I think a big part of that is just the perception that there's no great team. Obviously, as Alex and I have talked and talking with you, we see inside the conference a lot of really good teams. It looks like it's going to be a really competitive conference race, really fun. What do you think of kind of this national perception that the Big Ten is down, and what is it going to take for the Big Ten to start getting itself from a reputation standpoint back into, being mentioned among the top conferences in college basketball?
Hey, let me get real with you guys for a little bit. and I'm gonna be real, and I probably shouldn't do this, but I'm gonna be real. A couple years ago, the Big Ten made a great deal with Fox Sports. Fox Sports paid a ton of money to get the best Big Ten games. CBS gets all the great Big Ten games. Big Ten Network is getting even better Big Ten games. Who is the one network I did not mention? Should we even say it? It's ESPN.
Yeah.
ESPN does not get the best Big Ten games anymore. ESPN does not have any games of the Big Ten tournament. ESPN now has a vested interest, like Fox does in the Big Ten Network, with the SEC network, with the ACC network. Who do you see ESPN promoting the most? It's the SEC. It's the ACC. So who controls the national narrative in college basketball more than anybody else? It's ESPN. Need I say any more? The national narrative has been down on the Big Ten, and it just so happens to be at the same time when ESPN does not have as much of a vested interest in the conference as Fox and the Big Ten Network. So, I mean, it's not that the Big Ten's down. It's not that the Big Ten's weak. The Big Ten is deeper than any conference that's out there. The worst team in the Big Ten is much better than the worst team in the Big 12, in the SEC, in the ACC. Hands down. And that's Rutgers. Rutgers has gotten even more competitive than anyone realizes. On top of that, the Big Ten's now playing a 20-game season, which means for 20 games, you're going to get beat up. Even the best teams in the Big Ten are going to get beat up. Michigan State's got to play Rutgers twice, and those aren't easy games. You think that that's an easy game because it's the worst team in the conference versus maybe the best team in the conference? It's not an easy game. It's common opponents. It's familiarity. It's knowing how to take away what they do best. Yet, you've got the most influential network out there not really supporting the conference. In many ways, they've been down on the conference for years. And it just so happens to be at a time when they see them the least. So what's really going on? We don't live in a world of actual truth. We live in a world of perception. And we create perception with the power that we have. And the power happens to be social media and media. Well, ESPN controls a ton of that. And it just so happens that the Big Ten has a somewhat down year at a time when ESPN doesn't have any pull in the Big Ten and doesn't have any care really to push the Big Ten agenda. So I think we as a Big Ten network, we as Fox, we need to share with the country how strong the conference really is. And just because ESPN doesn't care about the Big Ten doesn't mean it's down. So I think we need to be real with that. Look, what you see in elections, none of it's real. It's all perception. It's all fake. It's all storylines. It's all agenda. It's all rhetoric. That's what sports is too. It's all rhetoric. So we need to do a good job of sharing what makes the Big Ten special, sharing what makes the Big Ten so competitive. So when the conversation comes back around in March about whether a team should or should not be in the NCAA tournament, we've done our job of making sure people know how competitive the conference really is. And that in some way has to counteract what ESPN hasn't done because they don't have a vested interest in this conference much anymore.
This has been an inspiring and motivational episode of Real Talk with Jon Crispin. That was
man, awesome. I gotta keep it real.
I'm fired up to go out and state the case for the Big Ten now. That was good. That was good. Okay, so last question.
I'll be running for public office next.
Yes.
Hey, Jerod, just to chime in, though, in a lot of ways, John, I agree with a lot of what he said. Just kind of look, and, I have some friends in media that obviously used to work at ESPN. Eamon Brennan is, a friend of mine who helped start Inside the Hall, and he's no longer working there. Dana O'Neill is someone that I've known for a long time. She's no longer there. Their whole, I think their focus on college basketball in general has really, with kind of how they've invested more into the NFL and obviously the NBA, which is, their right to do how they want to run their business. But, what they do with college basketball is a lot driven, obviously, as John says, on ACC and SEC and stars of the game. And for example, last night, it's Zion Williamson. It's, I'm sure you didn't hear anything about any of the other freshmen around the country, and ACC and the ESPN have a deal together. And last night everything was Duke, and I'm sure that's what we're going to be hearing about for the foreseeable future until somebody else comes along in one of those other conferences that they have that they're aligned with. And it's their coverage, as important as they are in terms of the viewership that they have and the amount of eyeballs and clicks that they draw, their coverage has really kind of dropped off just in terms of the depth of it and who they actually have covering the sport. Obviously, we like John Gasaway a lot. He's a good friend of the show. I think he does a terrific job. Jeff Borzillo does a good job as well. But they've really just kind of gutted their coverage, and it's really kind of just high-level flyover stuff of college basketball. And it's unfortunate that's kind of what drives the narrative nationally, but it does to an extent.
Yeah.
Well, it's important to point out, too, that ESPN's become – and look – this is not a knock on ESPN. This is the thing. Like, I think everybody likes to get emotional and say, I don't like ESPN. Screw ESPN. No, it's not that. ESPN has gotten so big that they've become an entertainment network. And what sells in entertainment more so than A-list celebrities? I mean, if you want to have a movie that's a hit, you better have Tom Cruise in it. Somebody like that. You better have Hugh Jackman. It better be an A-lister. Otherwise, it's like an independent film. And I almost feel like ESPN's become MGM. They've become Paramount. They've become the entertainment network. And if you watch the shows, it's all about the back and forth between guys like Stephen A. Smith. Stephen A. Smith is the expert in everything, apparently. Why is that? Is he really an expert, or does he just have opinions that people like to follow because he's an entertainer? And ESPN's done a great job of capitalizing on that, but it doesn't make them the foregoing expert in college basketball anymore. Why? Because they don't have the exposure that they once had. They have great guys. I mean, look, I love Seth Greenberg. Jay Williams and I are good friends. I played with Jay. Jay Billis is the foremost expert on college basketball. But when the focus is solely on the entertainment aspect of it, meaning the Star Watch, the Star Power, the hashtag Green Room guys from a couple years ago. When I was at ESPN, it was the Fabulous Freshman or whatever it was. It was all about whatever star freshman was in that game. That was the focus. And it's because it's become an entertainment network. It doesn't mean I won't end up there someday again. So it's not like they're the bad guy. It's just that they've become so big that they're an entertainment network more so than just serving the game of college basketball. So their interests are in the NFL. Their interest is in the NBA. Their interest is in high-level golf and high-level baseball. They're not taking junky baseball games in Major League. They're taking good Sunday night baseball. And that's what they should do. It's a prime network, but it opens the door for networks like the Big Ten Network to serve the interest of the conference, to serve the interest of the players and the coaches, to really share what's going on and what makes them special. So it's less about them being bad, and it's more about us having a responsibility to share what makes us our conference so great.
Do you know when you will be calling your next IU game?
I do have a couple IU games coming up. I know I got Rutgers IU. I got Northwestern IU. We get, Indiana basketball is a great national draw. So Fox Sports is going to take a lot of the Indiana games. ESPN, if they have a chance, will jump on an Indiana game. CBS will jump. Big Ten Network doesn't get a ton of Indiana basketball. Why? Because Indiana is a great draw from a television audience standpoint. So we don't get a ton of them. I got a few games on the road. I'm at Rutgers against Indiana. I'm at Northwestern against Indiana. There's a potential for me to be back on December 22nd. I'm supposed to be in studio, but we'll see about that. Indiana basketball, whether they're good, great, or awful, is always going to be a good draw. Because like when I was at UCLA, when we were bad, people still tuned in to watch because they always like to see a train wreck if it's going to happen. So when Indiana's good, it's going to be even better. And right now with Romeo Langford, Archie Miller, Indiana's a draw.
Well, John, thank you for taking the time. We always appreciate your appearances here on Podcast on the Brink, and we always learn a lot. So great to have you back.
My pleasure, guys. Sorry to go off, man. It's just how it goes.
No, that was great. We're going to make this a recurring segment when you come on. Real Talk with Jon Crispin. Let's get down to it.
Game on.
All right, thanks,
John. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Podcast on the Brink. We always appreciate you being here. Remember to join me and my co-hosts for more IU basketball talk at assemblycall.com and visit Alex over at insidethehall.com for complete coverage of Indiana basketball. If you want to support Podcast on the Brink, here is the single best way to do it. Tell anyone you know who loves IU hoops about us and suggest that they subscribe. Podcast on the Brink can be found on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere else podcasts are available. Tell your social media followers, email your friends, text your family members. For weekly discussion about IU basketball, they need to be subscribed to Podcast on the Brink. We'll talk to you next time. Go Hoosiers.